There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, this is really exciting to have Cauvery Madhavan, the Irish novelist, back for another bookish chat, joining us from Ireland. Hello, Cauvery.
Hi, Shawn. It's so great to be on your show again.
Well, you are one of my most popular guests, so thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you. I mean, I tell you, it's wonderful to talk to somebody who loves books so much, and who has you're not driven by any publishers' agendas and no PR agendas. So it's wonderful to be on your show.
Well, that is very gratifying to hear. I have read one of Cauvery's most recent novel, which is called The Tainted, which was originally published, 2019, maybe?
No, 2020, actually. Yeah, just
2020.
literally started the lockdowns. Yeah, 2020.
And really loved it. And I'll put a link to that discussion, that book chat with Cauvery in the show notes. And very eagerly awaiting the next one. So can you give me an update?
Okay, so I'm well stuck into writing it, Shawn. I hope my publisher is listening. I have a deadline of the 15th of December or thereabouts of this year. The book is called The Inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's set in 1980s in Ireland, in the southwest, in Glengarriff. And it's the story of a young man who inherits a cottage and comes to Ireland. He has Irish roots, and he comes back to Ireland when the rest of the country is actually migrating and leaving. It's what happens to him when he comes. Apart from inheriting a cottage, he inherits a bus run accidentally, and it's passengers that he has on the bus that the story is set around. But there's also a historical thread running through the book from 400 years ago. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to weave the thread in because I'm still in the early stages, but I have all the research done. And I'm really excited about it because, again, it's one of those, it's not a hidden history, but it's a piece of history that not many Irish people themselves know well. So, yeah, I'm very, very excited about it, Shawn.
Well, as of about 45 seconds ago, I am too. This is fabulous. Can I pre-book you for a book launch chat about your new novel and whenever it comes out?
Sure, Shawn. Yeah, it's one of those stories that, sometimes you come across a story and you think, I was meant to write this. We have a house in Glengarriff, and we've had it for the last 25 years. And this historic event actually took place to the left and the right of our house. And I mean, I knew of the story, but I didn't realize that literally the hill on which our house is had witnessed this event 400 years ago. And it just gave me goosebumps. And I am convinced that I needed to write the historical thread into my book. My heart and my soul is in West Cork, and I'm writing the book like it would be a love letter to West Cork.
How fabulous. Well, please hurry up. I'm very eager to read it now.
I hope it will be a good book.
I'm willing to wait. I'm definitely willing to wait. In addition to being a fabulous novelist, Cauvery is a fabulous reader. And so we're going to get into what she's been reading lately. Take it away, Cauvery.
Okay, Shawn. So the book that has stayed with me this year has been a book called Edith. And it's by a writer called Martina Devlin. A really fantastic book. It's a fictionalized account of Edith Somerville and her. So Edith Somerville was one half of the Somerville Ross writing team that wrote the Irish RM.
Okay. Do you see my face?
Yes.
I didn't. So I'm just going to interject and then please take it away. I didn't know about this novel, but I studied them as an undergrad in a course in Irish literature.
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
I ended up writing a paper about how their various biographers down through the decades had treated or ignored or explained away their possible lesbian relationship.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
and my professor worked with me, and I got that article published in an academic journal as an undergrad. So Somerville and Ross, my God. So now please continue.
Fantastic, Shawn. I'm
Yes.
delighted. I'm delighted at that the coincidental connection there,
Yes.
But this book, it's a fictionalized account of Edith's life, not her early life. This is her life after Ross had died. You know, it's an amazing account. The extensive research that's very hangs very lightly in the book. You don't get the impression that you're reading a history book, but you can see. I mean, as a writer, I was just full of admiration for Martina Devlin's, extensive research. I actually spoke to her at the Dingle Lit Fest at an event, and where she explained how she had been given access to family papers. She was very lucky. She had access to the family papers, and so she was able to write a really authentic, fictionalized version of what happened. And I mean, there's so many real life historical characters in the book. It's just a fascinating account of a
Yeah.
very, very fascinating life. Yeah.
Was Dame Ethel Smith in there?
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so.
You and I might be the only people connected to this video who really know much about Somerville and Ross. So can you tell us a little bit more about who they were and what they did?
Okay, so Somerville and Ross were a writing team, and there were two women who really forged amazing path in the time that they lived in the early 20s. People always suspected that they had a lesbian relationship, but it was never conclusively proven either way. They wrote a set of books that was then made into a television series called The Irish RM. It's a cult series, isn't it? It's kind of, people really love it. And as you said, Shawn, several biographies have been written, none of which I have read, but I've read this fictionalized account of Edith Somerville's latter life. Not her early life, but her life after Ross died.
She lived for a long
Yeah,
time after.
yeah, and how much she missed her friend, and the literary tool that Martina Devlin uses in the book to give voice to Edith's feelings and Ross's feelings. And it's just incredible, so clever and so well done. One of the characters from the Irish RM talks in the book. So it's quite a clever tool that the author has used.
Well, I didn't know
Even if
anything
you have,
about the novel. So I'm
yeah,
excited.
I think you'll really appreciate it, Shawn. It's a really good book.
I blew my own horn there talking about having my article on Somerville and Ross published when I was just a lowly undergrad and blah blah blah. So I need to take myself down a notch or two, because even though the article was heavily edited and it was a peer-reviewed journal and so on, many months after it was published, a friend of mine was reading it and said, I think this is a grammar mistake, isn't it? So it was supposed to be blah, blah, blah is, but it was blah, blah, blah are, or the reverse. So
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
that subject verb mistake. So yeah, I'm not that special.
There's always someone, I mean, that's the big fear, isn't it, as a writer? There's always somebody who pick apart something. So,
First paragraph. So there
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that to my attention. What else have you got?
So then I read a book by a really fine writer, and perhaps you've read her as well, Shawn. Small Things Like These. Keegan, by Claire Keegan.
I love her.
What a book.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I just love the book. It's set in the early 80s, in a small town in Wexford, in the east of Ireland. And, it's a story about a very ordinary man, an ordinary family. They're quite happy. Their life is chugging along. He's a coal merchant. And then he sees something at the local convent that begins to bother him. And I mean, anybody in Ireland, anybody who's read about, Irish history with the religious orders will know how much it affected the whole country. The revelations affected the whole country, while at the same time, the entire country must have known what was going on because people kept silent. It was a revelation about something that most people knew already. I don't think it's a spoiler. I mean, he sees a child, at a convent, and is very much taken with the fact that she begs him to take her away from there. And I suppose we could leave it at that then. So many people in the little town knew, and just sort of for various reasons, each for their own personal reason, kept quiet. And I mean, that's the story of Ireland. So many people knew, so many people in power knew, and yet people kept quiet. So, a nation was complicit, and yet a nation was shocked when the revelations were made. So, yeah, it's a fabulous book. Really well worth it. Well worth the read.
And it's what, 100 pages or something? It's just a novella. And within
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, this is the
enmeshment. Everybody's tied up in vested interests. Everybody has got an
Yes.
interest in keeping
Yeah.
silent, and
Yeah.
she shows that in a way that's so chilling.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. It was quite a emotional read. I just loved it. I thought she deserved every accolade, and she was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and she's well acknowledged for her work. The next book I read is something quite different altogether. It's a book by a man called Simon Kuper, but it's spelled Kuper, and it's called Chums. And it's not the kind of book that I would have picked up. And it's one of the reasons why it's so fantastic to belong to a book club. It's a political tittle-tattle kind of book. Okay. And on the cover, it says, how a tiny caste of Oxford Tories took over the UK. Now, it was a very, very quick read. I read it in half a day, a very, very quick read. But when I say it was illuminating, shocking, and made me so angry when I finished it. This is an investigative journalist who's written this book where he kind of outlines and details how a small group of Oxford graduates have controlled everything that happens in the United Kingdom. Boris Johnson and all the people that were around in his circle.
Big name. Three prime ministers that I can see: David Cameron, Theresa May. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. All of these people, learned their political skill in the debating society in Oxford. I mean, we know that in every country, there is an elite that rules, even in democratic societies. There's an elite that sort of, sets the
agenda.
The agenda. Yeah, exactly. But when you realize that in the UK, that agenda was actually set by like a dozen people. And that's it. It's not like, it's not like 2,000 wealthy, rich, influential people. It's just literally, 10 to 12, just a dozen or so people have shaped the course of millions of lives in the UK. It's just astonishing, and it's such an unbelievable, anger-inducing read. There's a lot to be said for being in a book club. You definitely go out of your comfort zone and you can be surprised. I read 2 books by a really fine Irish writer called Emilie Pine.
Is one of them
She
this
wrote,
one?
That's the one, absolutely. Yeah, Ruth and Penn.
I haven't read it yet, but...
And Notes to Self.
Her
first book was called Notes to Self. Have you read that, Shawn? It's a series of...
I haven't. I haven't read anything. Just I'm aware of both of them, but...
Notes to Self it's a set of essays, really, She talks about a lot of very difficult topics: miscarriage, menopause, being childless, several issues, and very, very beautifully written. And then followed that book up by writing Ruth and Penn, which explores similar themes in fiction. I like both the books,
The premise of Ruth and Penn is that there's 2 characters who don't know each other. I'm assuming by the end of the novel they get to know each other, but there's a wife whose marriage is breaking up or on the rocks, and then there's a teenager, and they don't have any obvious connection to one another, but the story is about both of them.
Yes, and it's kind of set over a period of a day or so, they have connections and yet they don't actually have connections. Lovely book. Really enjoyed that.
I heard something or other about it, and so I ordered a copy from Blackwell's, and when it came in the mail, it's a signed copy. So,
oh, very nice. Well, I have to say now, Shawn, I have unfortunately with this move, downsizing from a large house to a kind of a comfortable apartment, I've had to that's my bookshelf. That's one of my bookshelves. I have maybe another 2 or 3 like that, and that's it. I had to give away so many of my books, so everything now I am reading only on Kindle, which I swore I'd never would, but unfortunately I've had to. It's not half bad a thing now, because I can buy as many as I like, not have to worry about where I'm going to keep it.
Nobody really knows. It's your secret, right?
That's right. The other book I read was again by an Irish writer from the north, from Northern Ireland, Michelle Gallen, and she wrote a really fantastic book called Factory Girls.
I've read it.
What did you make of it? Did you like it?
Yes, but not as much as her debut.
Okay, and I haven't
read Small Town, and I love.
Yeah, no, and I haven't. Yeah, I haven't read the debut. I liked Factory Girls because for me, having lived in Ireland, and having lived in the north of the Republic in Sligo, in the 80s, we would go across in a car, and because of the color of our skin, we would just be sort of waved on to the front of the queues, and be let through the checkposts and the borders, while all the other people in the queues, the cars would be literally turned inside out, and the suitcases would be literally, you'd have knickers and bras and clothes and shoes on the road while they were being checked. So if you have experienced all that came with the Troubles, I think you'd really appreciate the book. Having been to Belfast in that late 80s to the early 90s, it was so deprived, and you can understand why there was this need to leave at all costs. So I really loved the book for that, and I loved her dialogue, and it was very real,
Very vivid sense of place, time, and
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but now, since you say that you prefer the debut, now I'm dying to read the debut. So.
Yeah, the debut is with a neurodiverse protagonist. And the interesting thing about that is that we learn on page 1 that her grandmother has been murdered, but the way she, as a neurodiverse character, processes that, we don't really spend very much time learning much more about that, because she's just kind of going about her life, and works at a fast food shop, and has completely unproblematic sex on occasion with her manager. She just has this really interesting way of being in the world, and lots of humor and great slang and so on. Now you make me think that I need to reread Factory Girls to see what I might have missed the first time.
Yeah, and also I think the thing in Factory Girls that I loved was the reality that actually, in a lot of cases, the Catholic and Protestant communities actually got over their problems because they had to live, and a lot of them lived, cheek by jowl, in particularly in workplaces, and they just got on with life. So it wasn't. They were at loggerheads, but yet they were all very pragmatic when it came to working with, the other side. And that I thought was fantastic in Factory Girls,
And then I would add to that, the flip side of it was the hypocrisy of both sides that's
right.
Is quite powerful.
Yeah.
Well, you've already made me like that book better than I did, so very good.
So then I tell you, Shawn, I went back to an old favorite, which I was rereading after 20 years. This is one of the reasons I actually love your show, because, we can talk about good books from ages ago.
Absolutely.
And good, so we're not, as I said at the start, you're never driven by any publishing agendas or PR agendas. So the book that I'm referring to is actually called The Hungry Tide by an Indian writer called Amitav Ghosh.
Great. You recommended it last time, and I still haven't read it, and so I'm delighted to have you sell it to me one more time.
Yeah, well, Shawn, I tell you something. I read it nearly 20 years ago and loved it. And there there literally cannot be a more relevant book today, because it's set in the mangrove, the mangrove swamps, which are called that area is called the Sundarbans. It's in West Bengal in India, and it's such a beautiful book. It's a book that's so relevant for today because it almost foresaw the problems of climate change and how it would affect coastal communities that are low lying. The dilemmas between nature and man. Do you protect animals? Do you protect the flora and fauna? Then what happens to the human beings living in that area? All those questions, and then there's also conflict. There's conflicts of gender. There's conflicts of class. It's such a multifaceted book. So it's about a young researcher, of Indian origin, who comes from Canada, actually. Am I right? Yeah, she comes from Canada to Bengal to research river dolphins. And she bumps into this guy who is a translator by trade, comes from a kind of well-off, well-educated, westernized Indian family. And they both find themselves together, just by coincidence in this area of the Sundarbans. And it's what pans out. And there's a climatic chapter. There are climatic chapters where they nearly die in a cyclone, and there's a lot of flora fauna involved in the book. In that there's tigers, there's crocodiles, and I know it might sound like a fantasy movie or a fantasy genre, but actually it's really very true to life of that area. It's a really fantastic book, and it's a book for our times, even though it was written so many years ago.
How much of a rereader are you? Was this quite a departure for you to go back and read an old favorite, or do you do that fairly often, Cauvery?
Yeah, I think I have always done that at the start of writing my own books, because you almost feel, God, I need to read some really good stuff, to know, what good stuff means. When I read The Hungry Tide, I could see the craft, because as he brings so many different characters and all, into a climatic thing, and you just think, wow, what a job he did. How he drew you into it, and how he put extensive research without making the book too heavy. And he did that even The Glass Palace. I don't know whether you've read The Glass Palace.
No, I haven't read anything by him, but I think I'm going to start.
Shawn, start with The Glass Palace. Start with The Glass Palace. Yeah, I'm actually, that's my next read of his book. I read that again. I don't know. I think might have come out 20 or 23 years ago, and again, the most fantastic book about how the British just abandoned Burma when the Japanese moved into that area during Second World War, during the war in the Far East. And it's a little known history of how, obviously except amongst historians and experts, about how the British just abandoned Burma to the Japanese, and what happened to the Burmese royal family and how they fled. It's just an amazing account.
I will fulfill your command. I will start with The Glass Palace.
So I have one book that I wanted. I haven't actually read it, Shawn, but I've heard so many great things about it. So it's called The Illuminated, and it's by an Indian writer called Anindita Ghosh. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. I think it's going to be, from what I've read about it, I think it's going to be an amazing book. Yeah, it's about a mother and daughter, and it tackles the rising religious fundamentalism in India that is determined to put women in their place. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading it, because that whole issue of rising religious fundamentalism is just like literally at the forefront of my mind every day, and I kind of have to stop myself from dwelling on it, because it just makes me so agitated and so anxious. Because I think I've spoken to you about this before. For a country that started 70 years ago as a secular democracy, where India's no longer can hold that torch and say that they're the largest secular democracy in the world. Yeah, religious
Cody and-
fundamentalism is suffocating the country. Yeah, suffocating the country.
So this is a debut novel from
Yes.
2021.
Yeah, I think it just came out. Like I think the release date was the 19th of January, and
Oh, so maybe it's
I
a
have
new.
I have no connection to the writer or to the publishing house, but I got a advanced copy of it to read.
Right. I think it came out in India in 2021, so this will be the first.
Oh, is it?
us.
Okay. I see that. Okay.
That's just Goodreads telling me that. Well, I hope you'll come back and talk about it after you've read it. That would be great.
I certainly will. I certainly will, Shawn. And then I just want to show you one big fat book that
All right.
which I absolutely love. And I'm just going to flip the camera around to show it to you. It's this one. It's called The Atlas of the Irish Rural Landscape.
Oh.
It's a really big fat tome. As you can see, I can barely hold it. It's huge and big.
Wow.
This is the book that I have by my side all the time because it's just such a wonderful. It's a wonderful geographical reference to Ireland, and as I'm writing my current book, I kind of dip in and out of it. You know, it has everything from the history of houses, the shapes of houses, the history of stonewalling, fencing, thatching. I mean, just name it. You know, it's such an amazing book, and it's the kind of book that, you know, if you love a country, it's fabulous to have it by your bedside and just dip into it, in and out of it. It's a book that's about the making of the Irish landscape, you know, as it is today. So it has the history of the habitat, and it has details, maps, photographs, about the bogs, the forests, woodlands, fields, housing history. It's a really, really fantastic book. And if you have any interest in Ireland and Irish life, I would highly recommend it.
Cauvery, how wonderful to have you back and tell us about all these books. Maybe the next time that I see you, you'll be here hawking your own book, which would be so wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Shawn. I mean, I'm nervous but excited. You know, it's one of those. You feel like a cat on a hot tin roof. That's the only description. You know, like you kind of, you're loving writing it, and you're still so scared that it may not be what you're hoping it will be, and at the same time you don't know what you're hoping it'll be, because that's the way I write. I wouldn't have anything plotted out, so I kind of have to just trust myself that it'll reveal itself as it goes.
So I'm excited about your project. I'm excited about the process, and I wish you all the best. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.